Salut les beaux et les belles gosses. My name is Brian, and last month I made a video reacting to the once viral video, France Made Me Cry. Some of the comments were suggesting that one of the reasons why she had such a negative experience was because she was Asian, basically implying that French people were particularly racist towards Asians, and I thought that was pretty interesting because I've lived in France for almost 3 years now, and as an Asian myself, I can't say I relate. So today, I'm going to be sharing with you my experience as an Asian American that moved to France. My case is quite specific, and I know that many Asians who actually grew up in France have a different experience than I do. In any case, whether you grew up here or moved here, if you're an Asian that has spent any time living in France, I highly encourage you to share your experience in the comments below. This way, we get more nuance on the topic and everybody learns. All right, let's get into it. I want to start this off by saying that my experience as an Asian guy in France has mostly been positive. There's just a level of respect and curiosity that I just naturally get here. Back in America, I would need some kind of success to get that level of treatment, whether that be career success, financial success, being extremely talented at a sport or a skill, whatever. I think most Asian men in America would agree with me when I say that, by default, no one takes you seriously. There's a whole history behind this discrimination. You had the Los Angeles Chinese Massacre of 1871, the Rock Springs Massacre of 1885, I think, and then you had the Chinese Exclusion Act, the Japanese internment camps during World War II, and then you also have Hollywood's constant emasculation of Asian men throughout its history. I can go on and on and on and on. I'm not trying to play victim here though, because I really hate it when people do that. But I do have to let you know that there is a historical context behind how Asian men are seen in America today. Going back to the curiosity that French people have for Asians, let me just give you an example from my own life to show you how that comes across. So I worked as a server during my time as a student in Lyon, and every couple of weeks I'd get a table that would play Guess the Asian with me. These were typically groups of 4 or more customers that would each make a guess on which Asian country I was really from. And at the end of their meal, they'd stop me to ask for the answer. None of them ever guessed that I was Malaysian though. It was always either Vietnamese, Cambodian, Korean, Japanese, and that was it. Anyways, I know that a lot of people might find this racist, but to me, it always just came across as genuine curiosity and playfulness more than anything. I never got the sense that they were disrespecting me or that they were treating me like some kind of entertainment. On top of working as a server in multiple restaurants during my 2 years studying in Lyon, I also had a part-time job at a small PR agency there. Sounds like a lot of work, but when your family doesn't pay for you to live and study abroad, you gotta do what you gotta do. Anyways, my bosses and coworkers loved me in every job I had. They never treated me differently than they did any other French person, except that sometimes they had to slow down their French and repeat things to me because I did have trouble understanding spoken French for a while. Even today, I still struggle with French slang. I'd even say they completely ignored the Asian side of me, and they went straight to making fun of me for being American. I had a manager who would always refer to me as Brian qui vient des States. Il est des States. And of course, I've lost count of how many times I got hit with the joke, "Where is Brian?"
Where is Brian?
What made it even funnier was that it was usually the chefs who would say this to me, whenever I came into the kitchen to run the food, because,
Brian is in the kitchen.
Another thing I feel like I have to mention is my experience dating in France as an Asian guy. I've gotten way more attention from women here than anywhere else I've lived. People have approached me on the streets, on the metro, in bars and clubs, parties, asking me for my socials or my number, and I feel like that experience would be unthinkable for Asian guys in America. It's no secret at this point that Asian men are considered the least attractive group of men in America. Again, Hollywood's emasculation of Asian men is a big reason why we're seen that way there. And I feel like it's just one of those things that makes the US more racist towards Asians than France has ever been. If you lived in New York at any point this year, you've definitely seen these ads by Bumble on the subway. For those of you who aren't familiar, Bumble is a dating app, and they basically had these ads dedicated to each demographic, except Asian men. At this point, Is that even a surprise? I've also talked about my experience socializing in France versus in America, and how self-segregation is a big problem in America multiple times on this channel. And for the sake of my regular viewers, I'm not going to get into it a fourth time here. So if you're interested in that, feel free to check out some of my older videos. Long story short, me being Asian has almost no impact on how I make friends and who I make friends with in France. And I can't really say the same thing about America. I feel like one other reason for my positive experience in France is the fact that France is by far the largest consumer of East Asian culture in Europe. The French have loved Japanese art and culture ever since they first had access to it. And there's even a word for this. It's called Japonisme. And I feel like today, that has expanded to include Korean pop culture as well. So if you look East Asian, a lot of French people already see you through that positive lens. Now, it seems like I'm painting a picture that you'll automatically have a fun time in France if you're an Asian, which is not actually the case, so let me balance that out a little bit by telling you some of the negative things I've seen. I had some female Asian friends, Taiwanese to be specific, that had French roommates that would bully them over and over again just because they couldn't speak French well enough and because they were too nice to stand up for themselves. As for me personally, I've only really been targeted by one, maybe two stereotypically racist French people my entire time living in France. And they were all blonde women, by the way, which I found interesting. What I really want to point out, though, is that almost all of my racist experiences in France haven't actually been with native French people, but with what the French call racaille. They all wear the same gray or black hoodies and sweatpants and vests. They hang around the streets waiting to harass anyone that passes by, and most of them are of North African origin. One time, a group of these kids came up to me, yelling at me, and one of them even tried to, act like they were gonna give me a spinning back kick. Because, Asian guy, martial arts. He stopped just short of actually hitting me. But still, it's just insane how they were even comfortable pulling that shit in the first place. There's this neighborhood in Lyon called Guillotière, and it's full of these kind of people. I've had friends who were robbed, threatened, harassed, followed, and even assaulted in that area. I went to Guillotière somewhat regularly because the biggest and cheapest Asian grocery store in the city was there. And every time I walked through that neighborhood, it was always a 50-50 chance of getting harassed. Everyone knows it's a place of crime and degenerate behavior, and yet somehow the city of Lyon has decided to do absolutely nothing about it, despite the fact that it's just right next to the city center, which is insane. I actually went to Morocco for a whole month last year, and before I hopped on the plane to go there, I really hoped that this kind of behavior was limited only to poor North African immigrants in France, that maybe North Africans would act differently in their homeland. But unfortunately, my experience in Morocco ended up being not that different. Literally, the first thing that happened to me right after I walked out the airport was getting yelled at with, "Ni hao, China!" And I looked around and I saw that it was a young boy who said it. And even though his family was trying to shut him up, they were also just laughing along with him. I stayed mostly in Casablanca and I visited Tangier and Chefchaouen as well. But no matter where I went, people would just shout, "Japan!" and "China!" over and over again while walking past me. I had both men and women mock me with ching chong noises, like ching chong ching chong chong ching chong chong ching chong chong chong. Bro, one time I even had a guy do the crane stance in front of me while making all these kung fu noises like, "Whoa." Now, I did find it funny in the moment, but looking back on it now, it's just insane to me that anyone would be comfortable doing this to a stranger. Anyways, pretty much all of my Asian friends that spent time living in France had the same experience that I did when it comes to getting harassed by these racailles. At this point, I guess it's just a rite of passage for anyone moving to France. So to sum this up, according to my experience, French people can be racist towards Asians, but I can literally say the same thing about every other Western country. What matters is that it's on a way, way smaller scale than what you see in the US, for example. On the other hand, people here tend to see East Asian culture very positively, and a lot of them even embrace it. I do get stared at a lot for being Asian, especially by older French people who oftentimes have kind of a suspicious expression when they do it. And if you didn't know any better, you'd think that they were being racist. But all I have to do is smile at them and say bonjour, and 90% of the time, they instantly light up and they greet me back. I think that just encapsulates my Asian experience in France. Alright, that's all I have for you guys today. Please let me know in the comments below if you think my story made sense, and please feel free to share any other thoughts you have on the video as well. And yeah, until next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye now.